I never thought I'd live to see the day when my own child would look me in the eyes and tell me to leave. But there I was, standing on the edge of a fancy wedding venue, clutching a gift wrapped in silver paper, listening to the laughter of people who had no idea I was just thrown out of my son's wedding. The music from inside floated into the cold evening air. It was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, and mine too. I had dreamed of this day since he was a boy. But instead of walking into the ceremony with pride, I was standing in the parking lot, alone, holding back tears I didn't want anyone to see. My hands trembled as I adjusted the little blue shawl around my shoulders. I had worn my best dress for this day, saved up for months just to buy it. The soft fabric brushed against my legs, but it did nothing to ease the ache in my chest. I'd imagined walking into that wedding with my head high, watching my son, my only child, stand at the altar with the love of his life. I thought I'd see his smile, that same crooked smile I'd raised, the one I used to see every morning when I packed his lunch and kissed his forehead before school. But now all I could see was the look on his face when he said, "Mom, you should go." The wind rustled through the trees, and I stared at the bright lights glowing through the big windows. Inside, people were clinking glasses, laughing, celebrating. They didn't know, or maybe they didn't care, that the woman who raised the groom wasn't even inside the building. I pressed the gift tighter against my chest. It wasn't some expensive gadget or fancy item like what the other guests probably brought. It was a photo album I had spent months putting together. Pictures from his first steps, his school plays, the time he broke his arm learning to ride a bike, our trips to the lake every summer. It was my heart in paper form. I had wrapped up my love for him and thought it would have a place on his special day. But now, I didn't know if I'd even get the chance to give it to him. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm inside me. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask how this could happen. But the truth is, this moment didn't come out of nowhere. Started a long time ago. If I was honest with myself, the signs were there all along. Subtle at first, like little cracks in a wall that eventually split it in two. I still remember the day he told me he was getting married. We were sitting on my back porch, sipping sweet tea like we always did on quiet summer evenings. His eyes were sparkling, his hands moving excitedly as he told me about the woman he loved. I could see it all over his face. He was happy, and nothing makes a mother happier than seeing her child happy. He told me she came from a big family, people with class, with money, with a lifestyle I never really understood. But I didn't care about any of that. If she made him happy, that was enough for me. "Mom," he'd said with a shy grin, "I want you to meet her." I remember the way I felt that night. I'd gone into my closet and pulled out the nicest blouse I had. I even curled my hair, which I hadn't done in years. I wanted to make a good impression, not because I felt less than anyone, but because I wanted her to like me. I wanted her to see me not just as some woman from a modest background, but as the mother of the man she loved. The dinner went well, or at least that's what I told myself at the time. But looking back now, there was something in her family's smiles that I didn't fully understand. It wasn't kindness. It was politeness, the kind that builds walls while pretending to shake hands. I remember the way her mother's eyes flicked over my outfit, the way her father's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I laughed at their jokes, I listened carefully, I tried my best. And my son sat there holding her hand, looking at her like she was his whole world. That should have been enough to keep me warm inside. But slowly I started to realize something. As the wedding planning moved forward, my place in that world grew smaller. At first, I was included in the conversations. Then I was updated after decisions were made. And eventually I wasn't mentioned at all. It was as if I'd gone from being the mother of the groom to being some distant relative who would show up quietly in the background. I told myself it was okay. I didn't have a lot of money to contribute to the big wedding they wanted, but I could help in other ways. I offered to help make centerpieces, set up decorations, even bake something for the rehearsal dinner. But every offer was met with, "Oh, thank you, but we've already taken care of it." Her family was handling everything, the venue, the caterers, the flowers, the decorations. And apparently me too. I'd always imagined that when my son got married, I'd help him choose the boutonniere, maybe stand beside him for a photo before the ceremony. I thought I'd walk in proudly, sit in the front row, and feel like I was a part of something beautiful. But as the days went by, that dream started to slip away like water through my fingers. I tried talking to him. One night over the phone I said softly, "Honey, I feel like I'm being left out of everything." He sighed, a tired, uncomfortable sigh. "Mom, it's just they've got their way of doing things. It's not personal." But it was personal. It was my only son's wedding. It was the day I had raised him for, the day I thought I'd feel proudest. Standing outside that night, with the laughter spilling from inside, I couldn't help but think about all the sacrifices I had made to get him here. I had worked 2 jobs to put him through college. I went without new clothes for years just so he could have the things other kids had. When he was sick, I stayed up all night holding him. When he got into trouble as a teenager, I was the one who fought for him, who believed in him when no one else did. I'd given him everything I had. And yet, in that moment, it felt like I meant nothing. My eyes stung and I blinked fast, refusing to let the tears fall. Not here. Not where they could see me. I stood a little taller, pulled my shawl tighter and whispered to myself, "You are still his mother. No one can take that away." The truth was, I didn't know how this night would end. I didn't know if anyone inside would ever come looking for me, or if I'd just be another invisible face in a story no one bothered to tell. But I did know one thing. This was not where my story ended. If only I'd known that someone I least expected, the bride's own father, would change everything. The first time I felt that quiet sting, the kind that doesn't show up in photographs or family memories, it was at their engagement dinner. I remember standing in front of my bathroom mirror that evening, holding a small velvet box in my hands. Inside was the pearl necklace my mother gave me the day I graduated high school. It wasn't fancy by today's standards, but it had a kind of quiet beauty, elegant, timeless. I had kept it tucked away for years, waiting for a special occasion to wear it again. That night I fastened it around my neck with shaky fingers, told myself not to cry, and practiced my smile in the mirror. I wanted to look my best for my son. It wasn't just dinner. It was a celebration of the life he was about to build. When I walked into the restaurant, I froze for a moment. The place was stunning, soft golden lighting, expensive crystal glasses, waiters in crisp uniforms. It was the kind of place people like me didn't usually visit. I felt small for a second, like a kid sneaking into a grown-up party. But then I took a breath, lifted my chin and told myself, "You belong here. You're his mother." I spotted him across the room, standing with his fiancée and her family. He was wearing a crisp button-down shirt and that same lopsided grin he used to flash at me when he wanted to get out of trouble. My heart swelled with pride. He looked so happy, so sure of his future. As I walked toward him, I noticed something shift. Her parents turned to look at me. Her mother's smile was warm at first glance, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her father nodded politely, the kind of nod you give a stranger you're forced to be nice to. I didn't let it get to me. I smiled wide, hugged my son tight and whispered, "You look so handsome." "Thanks, Mom," he said, pulling away quickly to introduce me. "This is my mom." Her father extended his hand. "Pleasure," he said in a firm, businesslike tone. Her mother leaned in with a tight smile. "We've heard so much about you." I laughed nervously. I hope it was all good. She tilted her head just slightly, like she was studying me. "Of course," she said smoothly. "We're just so thrilled to welcome him into the family." Welcome him into their family. It struck me even then, not welcome us together. Not we're so excited to become one family. Just him. As if I was already on the outside. I took my seat next to my son, grateful to at least be near him. But it didn't take long for me to realize how invisible I really was. Their conversations flowed like champagne. Effortless, familiar, full of shared references and inside jokes I couldn't understand. They talked about country clubs, vacations in Italy, and business investments. I nodded, smiled, tried to keep up. But they didn't look my way often. When the waiter came around, I quietly ordered water. Her mother asked for a bottle of wine I couldn't even pronounce. My son looked a little nervous, glancing at me as if he knew I felt out of place. But he didn't say anything. And that was the beginning of the silence between us. As the night went on, they started talking about the wedding. "I already spoke to the planner," her mother said, waving her hand like she was running a board meeting. "I think the country estate would be perfect for the ceremony. It's elegant, private, and we can control the guest list." Her father nodded approvingly. "And we'll handle the catering and the band. No need for anyone to worry about logistics." I laughed softly. "Well, Maybe I can help with the decorations or something small. I'd love to be part of it. For a second, there was silence at the table. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that feels like a spotlight just hit you. Her mother's polite smile didn't waver, but there was something sharp in her eyes. "Oh, that's sweet," she said slowly. "But we've already arranged for professionals. It'll all be taken care of." Her words were wrapped in sugar, but I heard the message loud and clear. "We don't need you." My son shifted in his seat. I waited for him to say something, anything to include me. But he just stirred his drink and gave me a weak smile. I excused myself to the restroom a little later, not because I needed to, but because I needed to breathe. Inside the small, spotless room, I stared at my reflection again. The necklace glimmered softly against my skin, but for the first time that night, it didn't make me feel beautiful. It made me feel like someone trying too hard to fit in. I pressed my hands against the cool marble sink, whispered, "You're his mother. That's enough." And in that moment I believed it. I still believed that my place in his life was unshakable. That love, real deep love, was stronger than class or status or anyone's disapproving smile. When I returned to the table, dessert had already been ordered without me. My chair felt colder somehow. They were laughing about a family trip to Aspen. I smiled along, pretending I wasn't a stranger at my own son's engagement celebration. The only time my son really looked at me that night was when the check came. Her father slid his card to the waiter without even looking at the total. My son looked down at the table, cheeks slightly flushed. He didn't offer. I didn't either. I didn't have that kind of money, and even if I did, it wouldn't have been welcomed. That moment made me feel something I'd never felt before in front of my child. Small. On the drive home, I replayed the evening over and over. I told myself it didn't matter. They were just excited. Weddings were hectic. Maybe I was overthinking things. But then I remembered the way they spoke about everything, the venue, the food, the guest list, as if I wasn't part of the family at all. I thought about how different things were when he was a little boy. Back then it was just us two. When his father walked out on us, I was the one who picked up the pieces. I was the one who worked double shifts, saved every spare penny, and sat at every school play with tears in my eyes. He used to hold my hand and say, "It's just me and you, Mom." And now for the first time it wasn't me and you anymore. It was them and him. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't want to be that mother, the one who complains, who makes things uncomfortable. I told myself to be patient, to be gracious, to trust my son. After all, love makes people nervous. Maybe he just didn't know how to balance everything yet. I went to bed telling myself this was just the beginning, and things would get better as the wedding approached. I had no idea that this was the first crack in something much bigger. Because if they could make me feel invisible at a dinner table, it was only a matter of time before they tried to erase me from something far more important. And what hurt the most wasn't their silence. It was his. If I could point to the moment when the ground beneath me started to give way, it would be during the months of wedding planning. The engagement dinner had left a small bruise on my heart. But what came after? That bruise turned into a wound that didn't stop growing. I had always imagined being part of my son's wedding, not controlling it, not running the show, just being there. I pictured helping him pick out his boutonniere, sitting next to him when he tried on suits, maybe helping the bride find something old, something borrowed, something blue. I thought we'd share those moments, just like all the stories I'd seen in movies and heard from friends. But as the weeks went by, I realized I wasn't part of the we. I was something extra. Optional. Like a placeholder people forget to fill in. I remember the first planning meeting they invited me to. It was a chilly Saturday morning, and I had woken up early, too excited to eat breakfast. I had my little notepad in my purse with some simple decoration ideas and budget-friendly suggestions. I didn't have much money, but I had heart, and I thought that would count for something. When I arrived at the cafe, the table was already full. Her parents were sitting with the wedding planner, a woman in a sleek black blazer who had that polished air of someone who managed other people's dreams for a living. They had swatches of fabric, floral samples, and tablet screens displaying layouts and themes. It was like stepping into someone else's movie, one where I didn't quite fit into the script. "Hi," I said brightly, pulling out a chair. They all gave me polite smiles. My son kissed my cheek quickly before turning his attention back to the planner. "We were just going over the reception setup," he said. "Oh," I replied, trying to catch up. I'd love to hear about it. The planner smiled at me in that professional way people do when they're being kind out of obligation. We're thinking elegant modern white roses, silver cutlery, crystal chandeliers. Minimal rustic elements. Her mother leaned forward. It has to feel like a fairy tale. I nodded, though inside I thought about how expensive all that sounded. That's beautiful, I said softly. Maybe we can add some personal touches too. Like photos from when you two met, or... Her mother's polite smile flickered. Oh, the planner has a vision for the space already, she said quickly, as if my words might wrinkle the perfect fabric of their plans. The planner gently redirected the conversation back to floral arrangements. I tried to speak up a few more times, offering small ideas like a family photo wall, or maybe me baking a few desserts like I did for every birthday he ever had. But every suggestion met the same response. A polite smile, followed by a conversation that moved right past me. It wasn't just that they didn't like my ideas. It was that they made me feel like my presence was a formality. Like I was being allowed to watch something I had no real stake in. And then came the real sting. The planner clicked her pen and said, "Okay, let's finalize the seating chart." My heart fluttered. "Oh," I said. "Where will I be sitting? I can help with my side of the guest list, too." There was a pause. A heavy one. The kind that tells you more than words ever could. Her mother cleared her throat and said, "Well, we've already made some adjustments. Since our family's pretty large, we'll be filling most of the front section. But don't worry, we'll make sure you have a good seat." My smile faltered for just a second, but I forced it back into place. "I'm the groom's mother," I said gently. "Usually the parents sit in the front, right?" The planner gave me a neutral look, as if this wasn't her battle to fight. My son avoided my eyes. He was stirring his coffee like it held the answer to everything. "Sweetheart," her mother said with practiced ease, "the way the layout is set up, it's just easier this way. We don't want to make things complicated." I wanted to ask, complicated for who? But I didn't. I just nodded slowly. My son finally looked up at me, and for a second I saw something in his eyes. Guilt. But he didn't say a word. When the meeting ended, I walked out feeling like I was watching my son's life from behind a glass wall. I could see everything, but I wasn't allowed to touch it. He caught up with me in the parking lot. "Mom," he said softly, "please don't take it personally." I turned to him, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not upset about the chair, honey. I thought I'd be more a part of this." He rubbed the back of his neck, a habit he'd had since he was a boy. "It's just easier this way. They're covering most of the costs, and they have a certain vision." I stared at him for a moment. "And what about your vision?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I just want everyone to be happy." I nodded slowly, but inside something tightened. It's funny how a single sentence can make you feel so far away from someone you raised. Over the next few weeks, it only got worse. I wasn't asked to go dress shopping with the bride. I wasn't told about the cake tasting. I found out about the wedding colors through a picture her cousin posted on social media. Her family was everywhere. They were the hosts, the planners, the center of it all. And me? I was the ghost. I tried to keep my head up. I told myself it didn't matter if I wasn't involved in the little things, as long as my son was happy. But late at night, lying in bed, my mind would drift to the years when it was just him and me. I remembered how we used to decorate the house for Christmas together. How he used to bring me flowers from the park as a little boy. How, even when we had nothing, we always had each other. Now it felt like we didn't even have that. Then one day I got a message from him. "Mom, don't worry about the rehearsal dinner. Her family's handling everything." I stared at my phone for a long time. A part of me wanted to respond, to say, I wasn't worrying. But another part of me, the quieter, more tired part, knew the truth. I was worrying. I was being erased little by little, and he didn't even see it happening. The final straw came when the invitations went out. I didn't know they'd been mailed. I didn't even get to see the design. I found out because a neighbor showed me the one she received. She'd been invited because her husband used to work with my son. I traced my finger over the elegant gold lettering, the big bold names of the bride and groom. And at the bottom in tiny print was the hosting line. Hosted by the bride's family. No mention of me. Not even a line. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there at my kitchen table, the afternoon sunlight spilling across the paper, making everything look too bright. I thought about all the things I had done to raise him, the sacrifices I made. And yet, at the moment his life was moving forward, I was a footnote, if even that. But what hurt the most wasn't the bride's family treating me like I didn't belong. It was my own son letting them. That night, I prayed silently. Not for revenge, not for a miracle, but for strength. Because I could already feel a storm coming. And somewhere deep down, I knew the wedding day would test me in ways I wasn't ready for. And I was right. The day before the wedding was supposed to be filled with joy. At least, that's what I'd always believed. You know, the way people talk about weddings, the laughter, the warm hugs, the way families come together as one. I'd imagined standing beside my son, watching him rehearse his vows, maybe sharing a quiet, proud moment before everything changed forever. But that wasn't what happened. I woke up early that morning, nervous and excited. I had picked out a simple but pretty outfit. A soft cream blouse with lace around the collar and a long navy skirt. I curled my hair and added a touch of lipstick, something I rarely did anymore. In the mirror I looked happy. Nervous, yes, but genuinely happy. I whispered to myself, "This is your boy's big day. Don't let anything ruin it." The rehearsal was at the wedding venue. A sprawling country estate about an hour outside the city. I drove there in my old car, the same one that had taken my son to school every day growing up. It rattled and hummed, but I didn't care. The road felt different that morning. Lighter. Like I was driving toward a new chapter of his life. When I pulled into the parking lot, the place took my breath away. A grand white mansion with tall pillars, trimmed hedges and soft lights strung along the pathways. It looked like something out of a magazine. A world far removed from the small house where I had raised him. I stepped out, holding onto the small gift bag I had brought. A handwritten letter tucked inside a card. I planned to give it to him after the rehearsal. A mother's words, simple but honest. I followed the sound of laughter to the garden where the rehearsal was taking place. Rows of white chairs were neatly lined up on the grass, a floral arch stood at the front, and people were everywhere. Her family, bridesmaids, groomsmen, friends from college. I spotted my son near the front, standing with his fiancée and laughing about something. For a moment my heart swelled with pride. He looked so handsome in his button-up shirt and slacks, smiling like the world belonged to him. But then I noticed something else. No one had noticed me. I stood there just a few feet away, but it was like I was invisible. They were wrapped up in their world. A world I clearly didn't belong to. I took a deep breath and forced a smile as I walked toward him. "Hi, sweetheart." He turned surprised. "Mom, I didn't know you were here yet." "I came a little early," I said softly. "Didn't want to miss anything." Her mother appeared out of nowhere, gliding over like she owned the air itself. "Oh, hello," she said, her smile tight as ever. "We're just getting things organized. You can find a seat anywhere." Her words were polite, but the tone carried something else, something colder. The wedding coordinator stepped up then, clipboard in hand. "All right, everyone. Let's start lining up. Bridal party, parents of the bride, parents of the groom." Her voice trailed slightly on that last part, and her eyes flicked to me like she wasn't entirely sure where I fit into the picture. I waited for someone, anyone, to direct me, but no one did. Her mother and father were ushered to their places at the front, standing proudly as the coordinator spoke to them with warmth and detail. Then she turned to me, hesitated, and said, "Actually, you won't need to stand up front during the procession. We've made some adjustments." I blinked. Adjustments? She gave me that careful professional smile. The couple decided to keep things simple. The bride's parents will be walking down together. The groom will already be at the altar, so you can just take your seat. I stared at her. My seat. Not walking in. Not standing with him. Just sitting. Like a guest. Before I could say anything, she moved on, calling for the bridesmaids. My son shifted awkwardly beside me. "Mom," he started softly, "please don't make a big deal out of this. It's just how they planned it." I swallowed hard. "I'm your mother. I'm not asking to walk down the aisle. I just thought I'd be standing somewhere close." His eyes darted away, and in that moment I saw it again, that guilt. That shame. But instead of defending me, instead of speaking up, he just whispered, "It'll be fine." I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I didn't want to embarrass him. I found a seat in the second row, away from the chatter and laughter. From there, I watched them run through the entire rehearsal. Her mother received instructions. Her father got a special acknowledgement. Bridesmaids giggled. Groomsmen patted my son on the back. And me? I sat quietly, clutching my bag like it was the only thing keeping me anchored to the earth. At one point, the coordinator asked everyone to move around for the final walkthrough. I stood to get a better view. She glanced at me and said too quickly, "Oh, sorry, can you step back a bit? You're in the way." Her words hit me like a slap. I stepped back, and back again, until I was standing near the hedge, away from the entire rehearsal. It felt like I wasn't even part of my own child's wedding. And as if to make things worse, a few people around me whispered. They weren't being cruel exactly, just curious. "Who's that? Is she a relative? Maybe a distant aunt?" No one even recognized me as his mother. And why would they? No one had said my name. No one had introduced me. I was a shadow at my own son's wedding rehearsal. The bride's mother walked by again, chatting animatedly with the planner. Her voice carried light and easy. "Everything's coming together so beautifully. I can't wait for tomorrow. Our family will look perfect. Our family." The words twisted inside me. Not once did she say both families, just theirs. When the rehearsal ended, people gathered in small groups, laughing and taking photos. I approached my son carefully, not wanting to seem hurt even though I was. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "do you have a moment? I have something for you." He glanced at the group of groomsmen calling his name and said, "Can we talk later, Mom? I'm kind of in the middle of something." I forced a smile. "Of course. Later." He jogged off laughing, the sound of it echoing in my ears as I stood alone on the lawn. I turned slowly, walking back to my car. The sky was turning golden, and the lights along the pathway flickered to life. It should have been beautiful. But to me, it felt like I was walking away from something that had been mine my whole life. I sat behind the wheel and just stared at the steering wheel for a long time. Not crying, just empty. Like someone had reached inside me and gently taken something without asking. I whispered to the quiet car, "Tomorrow will be better. It has to be." But somewhere deep in my chest, a small, honest voice whispered back, "No, it won't." The morning of the wedding came too soon. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying the rehearsal like a broken record. Every quiet moment, every ignored glance, every little sting. But despite everything, I told myself over and over, today is my son's wedding. I won't let anything ruin this day, not even them. I was up before the sun. I showered, carefully styled my hair, and put on the dress I had saved for months to buy. It was a soft, elegant navy blue gown with delicate beadwork on the sleeves. It wasn't flashy, but it made me feel dignified. Like I mattered. I fastened the pearl earrings I'd worn on his first day of kindergarten, because I wanted to carry that memory with me. Before leaving, I stood by the mirror and whispered, "You've made it through worse. Hold your head high." The drive to the venue felt heavier than the day before. The excitement I'd carried to the rehearsal had been replaced with quiet determination. I wasn't here to make a scene. I just wanted to watch my only son get married. That's all. When I arrived, the parking lot was already filled with shiny cars. People moved quickly, laughing, adjusting their suits, rushing in with bouquets and garment bags. I grabbed my clutch and stepped out of my car, feeling the cool morning air brush my skin. I walked through the front doors of the mansion. Inside, the place was alive with energy, soft classical music, florists finishing their work, servers in black and white uniforms carrying trays of champagne and water. But no one looked at me. No one said, "Welcome, mother of the groom." No one even asked if I needed help. I followed the signs toward the family dressing suites, where I assumed the groom's side would be getting ready. But when I got there, I found the door locked. I knocked gently. No answer. I knocked again, a little louder this time. Finally, a young woman I didn't recognize opened it a crack. "Hi," she said brightly, like I was lost. "Can I help you?" "I'm his mother," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm here to see my son." Her smile faltered. "Oh, they're kind of in the middle of something right now." "Something," I repeated. She glanced behind her, then lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret. "The photographer's in there. They're doing some special shots. The couple asked for no one to come in yet." My chest tightened. Not even his mother? Her lips curved into that awkward smile people give when they're uncomfortable, but don't want to be rude. Maybe later? I stepped back slowly. Sure. Later. The door closed gently, but it felt like it slammed in my face. I stood in the hallway staring at that locked door. My hands trembled slightly, not from anger, but from something quieter. Something that hurts worse than shouting ever could. Being shut out of moments that are supposed to belong to you. I wandered back toward the main hall, trying to keep my face calm, graceful. Guests were starting to arrive now, dressed in fine suits and beautiful dresses. Laughter echoed through the grand foyer as people hugged and posed for pictures. Her family moved through the crowd like they were hosting a royal event. Her father shook hands with everyone. Her mother floated in her pastel gown, directing staff like she was born to do this. I lingered near a row of chairs, not sure where to go. A coordinator walked by briskly, tablet in hand. I raised a hand slightly. "Excuse me," I said softly. "Where am I supposed to sit?" She didn't even look up at first. When she did, she said, "Name? Patricia, mother of the groom." Her eyebrows lifted slightly like she wasn't expecting that answer. She scrolled on her tablet, frowned, then nodded slowly. "Oh yes. You're right here." She pointed to a small card on a chair near the back row. I stared at it. Back row. Near the aisle, yes, but far from the front where her parents were seated. "There must be a mistake," I said carefully. "I'm his mother." The coordinator shifted uncomfortably. "I understand, ma'am, but the seating chart was approved by the couple." I felt the world tilt a little then. The couple? My son. I pressed my lips together and nodded. "Thank you." She hurried off. I sank into the seat, alone in the back row, watching as her family filled the front with chatter and cheer. People greeted them warmly. Everyone knew who they were. No one even looked my way. I could have been anyone, some distant relative or a friend of a friend, not the woman who raised the groom. I checked my phone. No message from him. Not even a quick, "Love you, Mom." When the ceremony began, soft music filled the garden. Everyone turned their heads toward the aisle. Her mother and father walked in together, smiling like royalty. The crowd clapped softly. Then the bridesmaids. Then the flower girl. Then her. And finally him, my son, standing under the arch looking handsome and nervous. My chest swelled despite everything. He was still my boy. The same boy who used to run into my arms after every scraped knee. The same boy who used to whisper, "It's just you and me, Mom." But I noticed something that sliced through me like a blade. As the officiant spoke, as everyone laughed at small jokes, as cameras flashed and vows were exchanged, not once did his eyes find mine. He looked at her parents, at the crowd, but not at me. And when the officiant said, "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" her father stepped forward proudly, declaring, "Her mother and I do." There was no moment for me. No nod. No acknowledgement. No line. Nothing. I sat there smiling tightly, clapping when everyone else clapped, laughing when everyone else laughed, as if pretending to belong could make the emptiness hurt less. After the ceremony, the guests moved to the reception hall. A photographer began gathering family members for group shots. I waited patiently near the steps, clutching my little clutch like it was a shield. I saw them taking the bride's family photos. First her parents, then siblings, then extended family. Everyone laughed and cheered. Then I saw him, my son, walking off with her and the photographer. I hurried up. "Sweetheart," I called softly, trying not to make a scene. He turned, already looking rushed. "Mom, not now. We're doing family pictures." I forced a smile. "I am family." He sighed, glancing at her. Her expression said everything. A tight smile. A small shake of the head. "Mom, we'll get some later, okay? Just later." I felt something in my chest splinter, but I nodded anyway. Later. But later never came. I ended up sitting alone at my table during cocktail hour while everyone else danced and took pictures. My name wasn't called. No one waved me over. No one cared if I was there. And then just when I thought the day couldn't twist any further, it did. I felt a light tap on my shoulder. I turned to see a woman, someone from the bride's side, smiling tightly. "Hi. I'm so sorry, but this table is reserved for her extended family. You might need to move. I stared at the little folded name card in front of me. Patricia, mother of the groom. It was sitting there like a cruel joke. Move. I repeated. Just over there, she said, pointing to a tiny table near the exit. We need this one for the family. For the family. Not me. I gathered my things slowly, walked to that tiny table by the exit and sat down. Alone. Unseen. Like I was watching someone else's child get married. Not mine. I wanted to cry. I wanted to leave. But I stayed. Because no matter what they tried to make me feel like, I was still his mother. And that was something they could never rewrite. But that night a storm was coming. I didn't know it yet, but soon everything would crack wide open. The reception hall glittered with gold accents and crystal chandeliers. Laughter filled the air like music. To everyone else it was a perfect wedding. To me it felt like I was sitting in a corner of someone else's joy, invisible at my own child's celebration. From my small table near the exit, I could see everything. The dance floor, the towering cake, the smiling faces, the photographers capturing every carefully curated moment. Her family moved like they owned the place. And in a way they did. They'd chosen the venue, planned every detail, controlled every guest list. Even the decorations felt like theirs. There was no sign of me or my side of the family anywhere. No photos of his childhood, no little touches from his life before her. It was like my existence had been edited out of his story. I watched my son, my only child, dancing with his new wife. His smile was wide, his laughter loud, and for a moment, he looked genuinely happy. And yet, as I stared at him, I felt a quiet ache that no words could describe. I'd raised him alone. I'd given up everything to make sure he'd have a good life. And now I was a guest. A stranger. A waiter passed by and offered me champagne. I shook my head. I didn't want to numb the pain. I wanted to remember every second of it, because pretending it wasn't happening would hurt more later. Then came the moment I'd both dreaded and hoped for. The speeches. The DJ called everyone's attention, asking guests to take their seats. Her father stood first, walking confidently to the microphone. The applause that followed was warm and full. He was well respected, a man used to being in charge of a room. Ladies and gentlemen, he began with a booming, practiced voice. Today is not just a union of two people, but the joining of two families. My wife and I have dreamed of this day since our daughter was little. We couldn't be more proud of the woman she's become, and the man she's chosen to spend her life with. His gaze landed on my son. The crowd cheered. My heart twisted. Then he added, and we're especially grateful to all of you for celebrating with our family tonight. Our family. There it was again. Like I didn't exist. After him, the maid of honor gave a sweet, tearful speech. Then the best man cracked jokes that made the room roar with laughter. Each word felt like it pushed me further and further into the background. And then the DJ said, now we invite the parents of the bride to the dance floor for a special moment. Her parents walked hand in hand to the center of the room. The lights dimmed, soft music began to play, and everyone sighed with admiration. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, my throat burning. When the dance ended, the room erupted into applause. Then the DJ's voice came again, light and cheerful. And now a special dance for the groom and his parents. My heart jumped. For the first time that night I felt seen. I stood slowly, clutching the edge of the table. People began turning their heads. My son stood near the dance floor looking around. For a split second our eyes met. But then she leaned in and whispered something in his ear. He hesitated, then shook his head. The DJ paused. There was a murmur through the crowd. And then awkwardly the DJ said, actually we'll skip ahead to the next part. Laughter rippled through the room. It wasn't cruel laughter, but the kind that happens when people don't understand what's really going on. My hands froze on the back of my chair. My face went hot. My chest felt hollow. I sat back down slowly, trying to hide the shaking in my hands. No mother-son dance. Not even a moment. Her parents had a spotlight. I had nothing. Then came the cake cutting, the bouquet toss, the garter toss, all the moments that make up a wedding night. And with each one I became more and more invisible. Until it happened. A few of her cousins, already drunk and loud, passed by my table. One of them laughed too hard and said, not even bothering to lower her voice, "Who's she again?" Another replied, I think she's like his aunt or something? I don't know. No, someone else added with a little giggle. She's the mom. But I heard she wasn't really invited. Laughter. They walked away without a glance back. My throat burned, but I held it together. I wasn't going to let them see me cry. Not here. Not like this. I glanced toward the dance floor, hoping my son might notice me. Just once. But he didn't. He was surrounded by her family, friends, photographers, speeches, lights. I wasn't part of this world anymore. And then came the final blow. A member of the venue staff approached my table, shifting nervously. Ma'am, she said gently. I'm so sorry, but this table is being cleared to make space for the dessert bar. We'll have to move you to the lounge area. My stomach dropped. Move me. She nodded quickly, clearly uncomfortable. Yes, it was in the plan. I just follow the seating chart. I stared at her. At my little corner of the room that had already been tucked out of sight. And now they wanted to push me even further out. Where exactly would I sit? I asked softly. She pointed toward a dim corner by the hallway. A table meant for overflow guests. Staff. People who didn't matter. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could say a word, a deep, firm voice cut through the room. She's not moving. The entire table of staff froze. Heads turned. Her father was standing a few feet away, tall and composed, but there was steel in his eyes. He walked toward us, every step deliberate. The chatter in the room quieted slightly, sensing something was happening. He stopped next to my table, looked at the staff member and said again louder this time, She is not moving. The young woman stammered. I was just told. By who? He demanded. His voice didn't need to rise. The authority in it was enough. By who? She fumbled with her tablet. The bride's seating plan. Her father glanced toward the head table, where his daughter and my son were laughing. His jaw tightened. He turned back to me and then for the first time that night really looked at me. His face softened. You're his mother. I nodded slowly, unable to speak. My throat was tight. Then your family, he said firmly. And no one puts family in the corner. Not at my daughter's wedding. The staff quickly stepped back, apologizing. He pulled out a chair at the head table, his own family's table, and gestured for me to sit. Come. You're sitting with us. I stared at him, stunned. I don't want to cause trouble. You're not, he said gently. But someone should have stood up for you long before this moment. His words hit me harder than I expected. He didn't know me anything. But in that instant, he gave me something my own son hadn't that entire day. Dignity. He offered his arm. I hesitated, then took it. When I sat at the head table, whispers spread through the crowd. People turned their heads. The bride's smile faltered. My son looked confused. But for the first time that night I didn't care. I belonged there. Whether anyone liked it or not. Her father leaned closer and said quietly, You raised him. That makes you family. Always. And just like that, a small fragile piece of my heart began to feel whole again. The moment I sat at the head table, I could feel the air in the room shift. It wasn't loud or obvious at first. It was subtle. A hush that rolled like a quiet wave across the reception hall. People turned their heads, eyebrows lifted, whispers floated like smoke. I'd spent the entire day pretending to be invisible. Now suddenly I was impossible to ignore. Her father didn't seem to care about the attention. He stood straight, one hand on the back of my chair like a silent declaration. He didn't need to make a speech or cause a scene. His message was clear. She belongs here. At the other end of the table, the bride froze mid-laugh. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, everything in her carefully planned evening cracked just a little. My son leaned closer to her, clearly confused. She whispered something sharp, and he glanced toward her father, his jaw tightening. The music played on. Servers continued bringing plates to the tables. Guests forced their smiles and went back to eating. But the tension sat there, coiled like a spring. I sat stiffly, unsure of what to do with my hands. Part of me wanted to disappear again, to shrink back into the corner. But another part, the one that had spent years sacrificing, building, raising, lifted her chin. This was my son's wedding. My place wasn't in the shadows. Her father leaned slightly toward me. His voice was low but firm. Don't let them make you small. Those words landed deep. No one had said anything like that to me in years. Minutes later, the bride walked over to our table. The smile she wore didn't reach her eyes. It was tight, strained, the kind of smile that hides a storm behind it. My son followed a few steps behind, rubbing the back of his neck like he wasn't sure where to stand. "Dad," she said sweetly, too sweetly. "Can I talk to you for a second?" He didn't move. "Whatever you have to say it here." Her eyes flicked toward me, then back to him. "This is supposed to be our night. The seating arrangements were planned carefully." "Then your plan was wrong," he said evenly. "You don't put a groom's mother in the back of the room." Color rose in her cheeks. "We didn't mean anything by it. It was just easier this way." "Easier," he repeated. "Easier to treat the woman who raised your husband like a stranger?" My son flinched slightly at the word raised. And that flinch told me everything. He knew what was happening wasn't right. But he also hadn't stopped it. She pressed her lips together, trying to keep control. "Dad, can we talk privately?" "No," he said simply. "Because the way you've treated her wasn't private." A small audible gasp came from one of the nearby tables. Guests were pretending not to listen, but their eyes told a different story. This was no longer a quiet family disagreement. This was happening right in front of everyone. Her voice lowered but sharpened. "She wasn't supposed to sit here. She's family," he said. "And as long as I'm breathing, she's staying right where she belongs." Her smile cracked entirely then. She turned to my son, silently demanding he take her side. He shifted uncomfortably under the weight of both stares, his bride's and her father's. "Say something," she hissed under her breath. He looked at her, then at me. "Can we maybe not do this right now?" But her father wasn't backing down. "You should do this right now," he said. "Because the way you've let this woman be treated today is shameful." The bride's face flushed a deep red. "This is my wedding, not hers. And yet," he said slowly, "without her there wouldn't be a groom." A murmur swept through the crowd. Even the band on the small stage faltered for a second, the soft melody slipping as everyone felt the tension thicken. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell him to stop, to not make it worse. But the truth was, a part of me was grateful. Grateful that someone finally saw me. That someone spoke aloud what I'd been too tired, too heartbroken to say. My son stepped forward then, his voice low. "Dad, please," he said to her father. "This isn't helping." Her father turned to him, eyes sharp. "Helping? You think watching your mother be humiliated all day long was okay? You think standing here doing nothing while they shoved her in a corner was being a good son?" The room went silent. My son's jaw clenched. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is," her father replied. "It's as simple as respect." My son's eyes flicked to mine, and for the first time that night I saw it clearly, the guilt, the shame, the quiet buried part of him that knew I deserved better. The bride reached for his hand, pulling him toward her. "This is ridiculous," she whispered fiercely. "She didn't even pay for anything." The words sliced through me like a blade. I froze. She said it like my worth had a price tag. Like everything I had given him for the past 20-something years didn't count because I hadn't written a check for the wedding. She had no idea how many times I'd skipped meals so he could eat. How many nights I worked double shifts. How many quiet sacrifices built the foundation he was standing on today. Her father's head snapped toward her. "What did you just say?" She tried to backtrack. "I didn't mean it like." "Yes, you did," he cut in. "And that's the problem." More whispers. People leaning in. Cameras flashing, phones subtly lifted to record. The carefully perfect wedding image was unraveling. My son tried to diffuse it. "Can we just not do this in front of everyone?" But it was too late. The truth had already broken through the glossy surface. Her father's voice was lower now, but every word landed like a hammer. "I raised you to respect people, especially the people who gave everything for you. If your wife, or you, can't understand that, then maybe you need to think long and hard about the kind of man you want to be." The bride stiffened. "Dad." But he wasn't done. "This woman," he said, pointing to me, "deserves better than to be hidden in the back of the room like she's a stranger. She is family, whether you like it or not." All eyes were on us now. I felt exposed, raw, every painful moment of the day sitting like a weight on my chest. But under that pain was something else, strength. Not loud. Not vengeful. Quiet. Steady. I stood slowly. "It's all right," I said softly, my voice clear. "I don't want to cause a scene." But her father shook his head. "This scene was caused the moment they decided you didn't matter." For a moment no one moved. My son stood frozen, caught between the woman he married and the woman who raised him. The bride looked furious, humiliated that her perfect wedding was cracking in front of everyone. Her father stood like a pillar. And me? I felt something shift inside me. For the first time that entire day I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't apologizing for existing. I wasn't sitting quietly while people pretended I wasn't there. I was standing. And they had to look at me now. For a few long, unbearable seconds no one moved. The room had gone silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the dull clinking of a fork nervously hitting a plate somewhere near the back. Every face was turned toward us. The bride fuming, her father rigid with conviction, my son standing there caught between two worlds, and me finally standing for the first time all night, with my spine straight and my heart beating like a drum inside my chest. The bride was the first to break the silence. "This is insane," she snapped, her voice louder now, cracking under the weight of her own frustration. "This is our wedding, not some family therapy session." Her father didn't flinch. "And yet it's your behavior that made it one." Her cheeks flushed red. She spun toward my son. "Are you seriously going to just stand there? Do something. This is humiliating." My son looked at her, really looked at her, and then at me. I could see the war happening inside him. He loved her clearly. But deep down, he knew what had been done to me wasn't just a series of little oversights. It was a deliberate choice. And worse than that, he'd allowed it. "Say something," she demanded again, voice sharp. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. I didn't want any of this to turn into a fight." "That's not an answer," she hissed. And then for the first time, I let my own voice carry through the room. "Of course it isn't," I said quietly, but the stillness around us made every word sound louder. "You didn't want a fight. You just wanted me quiet. Out of the way." His eyes snapped toward me, guilt flickering like a storm behind them. He opened his mouth but nothing came out. Her father's voice dropped, low and cutting. "She's right." The bride let out a bitter laugh, arms crossed. "Oh please. We didn't do anything wrong. We were just trying to keep things organized. She jabbed a manicured finger in my direction, has always been too sensitive about everything. It's not my fault if she chose to sit alone." A sharp murmur ran through the crowd at that. Even some of the guests who had been silent all night exchanged uneasy looks. I turned to her slowly. "I didn't choose to sit alone. I was put there. On purpose." Her smirk faltered just a bit. "That's not." "Yes, it is," I interrupted softly. "From the rehearsal to the ceremony to tonight, I've been pushed to the side over and over again. And you know it." Her jaw clenched. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in front of her guests. Her father stepped closer, his presence suddenly towering between us. "You disrespected her in front of everyone. And worse, you made my daughter's husband complicit in it." The bride bristled. "Dad, stop acting like she's some kind of victim." "She is a victim," he shot back. "A victim of small, cruel choices that added up to a very big humiliation. And I raised you better than this." Her eyes glistened with tears of anger. "Why are you taking her side?" "Because she's right," he said simply. My son finally spoke then. "Can everyone just calm down?" His voice cracked. It wasn't commanding, it was tired, strained. A man pulled between the woman he married and the woman who raised him. I recognized that tone. I'd heard it in him before, back when he was a boy caught between his parents during hard times. Only this time he wasn't a boy. He was a man. And his silence had weight. "No," his father-in-law said firmly. "This shouldn't be calmed down. This should be faced." The bride turned toward him. "You're ruining my wedding." Her father laughed softly, not out of amusement but disbelief. "No, sweetheart. You ruined your own wedding the moment you decided to humiliate someone who deserved honor." That sentence landed like a stone in the center of the room. You could almost feel it ripple outward. My son took a step toward me. His voice lowered, heavy. Mom, I never wanted you to feel unwelcome. I swear. I thought maybe if I just didn't push too hard, things would work themselves out. I met his eyes then, my boy who once clung to my hand on the first day of school. My boy who cried when I worked late nights. My boy who, when he was 8, promised he'd never forget everything I did for him. And now, he was a man who had stood by while I was erased from the biggest day of his life. I swallowed hard, steadying my voice. You didn't want to upset her, I said softly. I understand that. But you forgot something along the way. He frowned slightly. What? You forgot me. His shoulders sagged like the words hit something inside him he'd been avoiding. The bride's hand clamped onto his arm, possessive and panicked. Don't let her guilt you, she hissed. This day was supposed to be about us. Not her. Her father's voice came low, stern. It's about family. All of it. Her face twisted in frustration. She doesn't even fit into this family. We had everything perfect. The seating, the photos, the entrance. Everything. And she threw up her hands. Doesn't belong here. The room collectively inhaled. The sentence hung there, sharp as glass. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stared at her and said calmly, You're right. I don't belong in your world. But I belong in his. Whether you like it or not, I was here before you. And I'll love him long after the flowers from tonight have wilted. The bride's face went pale. Her father's jaw set in quiet fury. You just spoke the ugliest truth out loud, he told his daughter. And the entire room heard it. My son stood frozen. A part of me almost pitied him. He looked like a man realizing too late what his silence had cost. I turned to him and said, my voice steady, You don't have to pick sides. But you do have to decide what kind of man you're going to be. The room was so quiet that even the string lights above us seemed to buzz louder. People were holding their breath. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. This was a reckoning. The bride shook her head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I can't believe this is happening. Her father crossed his arms. Believe it. Because the way you treated this woman tonight says a lot more about you than any vows you made. My son looked between us, his wife and his mother. And then for the first time all night, something in him shifted. He straightened his shoulders. His face hardened with resolve. He turned to her and said clearly and firmly, You went too far. She blinked. What? He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. You humiliated my mother. And I let you. But that was wrong. All of it. Her bottom lip trembled. You're taking her side? He shook his head. I'm not taking sides. I'm standing where I should have stood from the beginning. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone clapped once before realizing this wasn't a movie. I felt my chest tighten, not from pain this time but something like relief. After hours of silence, after a day of being invisible, my son was finally seeing me. The bride stepped back like she'd been slapped. I can't believe you're embarrassing me. No, he said quietly. I think you did that all by yourself. Her father closed his eyes briefly, as if both heartbroken and proud at the same time. For the first time that night, I didn't feel like I had to shrink myself to fit into their world. I stood there, fully in my skin, unshaken by their whispers or their perfectly planned night. Whatever came next, the truth had finally been spoken. And once the truth is out, it can't be put back into the box. The room didn't feel like a wedding anymore. It felt like someone had torn off the silk wrapping that had been hiding a rotten core underneath. The music had stopped long ago, the DJ frozen behind his table, unsure whether to play something cheerful or just disappear. Guests whispered in low, anxious tones, but no one dared to move too close. It was like watching a storm build in the middle of what was supposed to be a celebration. The bride stood rigid, trembling slightly. Her veil was slipping from one side of her hair, and her flawless makeup had begun to streak with tears. Her perfect image of a perfect wedding had been shattered, and she didn't know how to hold the pieces together. My son stood between us, the groom, the peacemaker, the man who had always hated confrontation. But there was something different in his face now. A heaviness. A clarity. His voice came low, almost a whisper. This wasn't how today was supposed to go. I met his eyes. It never is. But how it goes, that depends on the choices we make. The bride snapped suddenly, the sound sharp like a whip. Oh, please stop acting like you're some kind of victim here. You could have just stayed quiet, sat at your little table, and none of this would have happened. Her father turned sharply to her. Enough. But she didn't stop. No, you don't get to talk to me like that, she yelled, tears streaming freely now. This was supposed to be my day. Not hers. Not yours. Mine. And she ruined it. She ruined everything. The words came out ugly, messy, raw. The mask she'd worn all day finally cracked, and what was left underneath wasn't polished at all. You ruined it yourself, her father said quietly. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was disappointed, and somehow that hurt more. You can't build something beautiful on cruelty. She shook her head violently like she couldn't even hear him. Then she turned to my son. Tell me you're on my side. Tell me this is still about us. Please. But his expression told her what she didn't want to hear. He stepped closer to her, voice steady now. It is about us. But us doesn't mean I have to erase the woman who raised me. Her bottom lip trembled. You're supposed to be my husband. I am, he said softly. And I'll stand beside you. But not if it means turning my back on my own mother. That landed like a hammer. She staggered back a little, shaking her head. You don't understand. I did everything for this wedding. I wanted it to be perfect. It's not perfect if it hurts people, he said. Her eyes filled with rage and pain. You're choosing her. He didn't hesitate this time. I'm choosing what's right. She covered her face with her hands and let out a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a scream. The bridesmaids who had been huddled near the champagne table finally moved toward her, guiding her away from the center of the room. She didn't fight them. She just let herself be led, still sobbing, her white dress dragging like a ghost behind her. The guests slowly began to disperse into smaller groups. I could hear their whispers. Did you hear what she said? Poor woman. Can you imagine? I didn't know the mother wasn't included in the photos. Whispers have a way of carrying truth louder than the speeches ever could. Her father walked up to me, his expression soft now, full of a quiet regret. I am so sorry, he said, and I could tell he meant it. I should have stepped in earlier. I shook my head gently. You didn't owe me that. Yes, I did, he said. Family isn't about blood alone. It's about doing what's right when it matters. I blinked back the tears that had been sitting behind my eyes for hours. Thank you. For standing up for me when no one else would. He nodded slowly. You deserved better than what happened tonight. Then he looked at my son. And you, son, you'd better make this right. My son lowered his head. I know. The bride's father walked away after that, following his daughter, leaving just me and my son standing under the soft golden lights that suddenly felt too bright. The room was quieter now. The string lights above us flickered like distant stars, and for the first time in a long while, I saw my son without the weight of performance. No tuxedo smile, no wedding day grin, just him. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. Mom! I could hear the crack in that single word, the kind that only comes when guilt has sat too long inside someone. I didn't know how to handle this, he whispered. I thought if I didn't push too hard, she'd come around. I thought we'd just make it through the day. I let out a long breath. And while you were making it through the day, I was sitting alone. His face twisted in pain. I know. I looked at him, really looked. My little boy who once hugged me every night before bed. Who used to save a seat for me at his school plays. Who always made sure I felt included. Somewhere between growing up and falling in love, that boy had gotten lost in a man who was trying too hard to keep the peace. You don't know how it felt, I said softly. To see all those tables full of people laughing and mine empty. To see the family photos being taken without me. To walk into the reception and realize I wasn't supposed to be part of it. His eyes welled up. I'm sorry. I know, I said. But sorry doesn't fix what's broken. He lowered his gaze, tears falling freely now. I should have stood up for you. Yes, I said simply. Because it was the truth. There was no anger in my voice anymore. Just a deep, tired ache. But under that ache, something else was beginning to rise. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. A quiet, solid strength. I reached out and touched his face gently the way I used to when he was a boy. You're my son. And I'll always love you. But love doesn't mean I'll let you forget who I am. He grabbed my hand like he was holding on to something he was afraid to lose. I don't want to lose you. Then don't, I said. But you have to remember, being a husband doesn't mean erasing the woman who raised you. And being a son doesn't mean letting people walk over your mother. He nodded through the tears. I promise I'll make this right. I hope so, I said softly. Because it's not just about tonight. It's about who you're going to be. For the first time in hours I saw him straighten, not as a man caught between two women, but as someone finally realizing he could choose integrity over silence. The band had packed up their instruments, the tables had been half cleared, and the cake sat untouched at the corner of the hall. The wedding was over, but something else had just begun. A reckoning. A chance to rebuild. He looked around the emptying room. I don't even know where to start. Start with the truth, I said. Everything else will follow. He let out a shaky laugh, the kind people give when they're both relieved and terrified. You've always known what to say. That's because I've had a lifetime of having to say it, I replied with a small smile. Even when nobody wanted to hear. He hugged me then. Not a polite wedding hug. Not a quick, awkward one. But the kind that carries years of history. Scraped knees, late-night talks, birthdays, heartbreaks, everything in between. It was the first real hug of the night. Maybe the first real one in a long time. For a brief moment, the chatter of the guests faded away. The golden light stopped feeling harsh. And I let myself breathe again. When he finally pulled back, he whispered, I love you, Mom. And for the first time that day I believed him. The reception hall was almost empty now. Only a few stragglers lingered, chatting quietly and collecting their coats. The chandeliers overhead cast a soft, warm glow, reflecting off the polished floors, making the room feel almost peaceful after the storm that had passed. I sat quietly at the head table, my hands folded on the tablecloth, feeling the weight of the day settle into something calmer. My son remained beside me, shoulders tense but resolute. For the first time in hours he didn't seem lost between two worlds. He was here, present, fully aware of what mattered. He took a deep breath and looked around the room. Mom, he said, voice steady now, I want everyone to know something. Everything that happened today, it wasn't right. And I should have fixed it. I should have made sure you were treated the way you deserve. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. It's not about punishment, honey. It's about honesty. And making sure people understand how important it is to treat the people who love you well. He nodded, and then with a firm breath, he straightened and called out, Everyone, could I have your attention for just a moment? Heads turned. A few remaining guests paused, curious. Even some of the staff stopped in their tracks. I want to say something, he continued, voice clear and strong. My mother Patricia has raised me, loved me, and sacrificed more than anyone could ever know. And yet today she was treated like a stranger at her own son's wedding. That was wrong. And I want to fix it. There was a quiet murmur of surprise. Some guests nodded. Others stared, unsure how to react. I've spent too long trying to keep peace and not upset anyone, he said, glancing briefly at his new wife's direction. But peace isn't peace when it comes at the cost of someone's dignity, especially your own mother's dignity. So, from now on I'm choosing differently. I'm choosing what's right. I felt my chest tighten. These weren't just words, they were an acknowledgement, a promise. And finally, my son was taking responsibility in a way he hadn't all day. The bride, sitting quietly at her own table in the corner, looked as if she'd been punched in the gut. She avoided my gaze entirely, her perfect composure shattered. Her father, still standing by the edge of the hall, gave me a small, approving nod. He didn't need to say anything. His look said it all. Justice, fairness, and understanding had finally been restored. My son turned to me. Mom, would you come with me for the mother-son dance? My hands trembled. The thought had never occurred to me that I would actually dance at this wedding. All day I had been shuffled aside, invisible, forced to watch everything from the shadows. And now finally he was offering me the chance to reclaim my place. I smiled, a real unguarded smile, and nodded. I'd love to. He extended his hand and I took it. We moved to the small space cleared for dancing. The soft music started. A gentle, familiar melody that felt almost like it had been waiting for this moment. As we swayed together, I felt the tension of the day melt away. Not all the way, not immediately. There were still wounds that had been opened, stings that would take time to heal. But for the first time in hours I felt like I mattered. Like I had my rightful place. When the dance ended, my son leaned down and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me. Even when I let you down." I kissed his cheek softly. "You'll never have to thank me for that. That's what mothers do." We stepped back to the table and he gave me a small, proud smile. That smile said more than words ever could. He'd finally understood what it meant to honor the people who had truly loved him. Across the hall, the bride remained at her table, staring at us. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "You need to learn that respect and kindness matter more than perfection," he said softly. "Tonight has taught you that." She didn't respond. Her silence was her acknowledgement. Grudging, yes, but acknowledgement nonetheless. The rest of the evening passed more quietly. Guests began leaving, congratulating us as a family. Some came up to me personally, whispering apologies or admiring words. Some had seen the confrontation, and while uncomfortable, they respected the integrity of the moment. My son stayed at my side, holding my hand as we walked through the exit, stepping out into the cool night air. The lights from the hall spilled out behind us, a soft glow marking the end of the chaos. "Mom," he said, turning to face me, "I know things can't go back to exactly how they were, but I want you to know, you'll always be my family. Always." I squeezed his hand. "And you'll always be my son. That doesn't change. No matter what happens, that's the truth." We stood for a moment in the quiet night, letting the cool breeze wrap around us. The city lights flickered in the distance, and for the first time all day, I felt calm. Not just calm, relieved. Proud even. Proud of my son for finally standing up. Proud of myself for staying in the moment, for not letting their cruelty steal my dignity. The bride and her father eventually left behind us quietly, the tension still thick but no longer sharp enough to cut through me. Whatever resentment lingered, whatever lessons had been painfully learned, it was no longer my burden alone. My son turned to me again, his eyes glistening. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything today. I should have fought harder from the start." I shook my head. "Honey, life isn't about what we should have done. It's about what we do from this moment on. And right now you're making it right. That's what matters." He smiled through his tears, that boyish grin I remembered from his childhood. I'll never forget this lesson. I laughed softly, a quiet, happy sound that hadn't escaped me all day. "I hope you don't. And I hope you remember that no one gets to make you feel small. Especially not your own family." He nodded, taking a deep breath. "I won't forget. And I promise, I'll never let anyone treat you like you didn't matter again." We walked to the car together side by side. For the first time all day, I felt like we were a team again. Mother and son, unbroken, resilient, and ready to face whatever life threw at us next. The wedding had been a storm, a test of patience and dignity, and a display of cruelty from people who didn't understand the value of respect. But it had also been a moment of triumph. I had been pushed to the edges, ignored, humiliated, and still I stood tall. My son had finally realized the depth of his own responsibility, and together, we reclaimed what had been almost lost. Our bond, our truth, and our place as a family. As the car pulled away from the hall, the golden lights faded into the distance. I looked over at my son, seeing him not just as the man he had become, but as the little boy I had raised, who finally understood the meaning of love and respect. And in that moment I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Because no matter what anyone else thought or tried to do, we had each other. And that was all that truly mattered.